MJ. How are you? Aren't the days just amazing? Aren't the kind of ebbs and flows of days just incredible? Sometimes just feel like timeless all the time in this beautiful cosmic dance of energies, highs and lows, and it's beautiful. And as you do, as someone who doesn't watch mainstream TV, I do often get a little bit lost on the YouTube. And I ended up Okay, so very recent events, the word narcissism came up. And if you guys have been listening or watching me for a while, I'm really kind of not into the labels. I'm not really into the whole like light worker label or labels just potentially have limitations to them. However, this topic came up and so I thought I'd watch a few little videos about narcissism from clearly people who have encountered people like this. And now what I'm aware of is that we are all reflections of one another. So by the definition of narcissism, then naturally the narcissist is going to attract someone highly sensitive, someone who is deeply compassionate, someone who really, really, really cares, and someone who probably has their own unworthiness sense and thus people pleasing tendencies. So you could say the disconnected or like unaware empath, someone who's just like, oh yeah, I'm just really sensitive all the time, that's going to be really, really tricky because, this idea of the narcissist is somebody who's so deeply buried their pain that they have like multiple level tactics to manipulate people to make their life how they want it to be. And you can't really work it out because it's just like each and every one of us has our own vision and our own desires for a life. But a narcissist sort of plays psychological games to either pit people against each other or just kick people out that they don't like. They basically, they're the opposite in essence with regards to their feelings. Like an empath can feel lots of feelings of everybody around them, and so they need to be really disciplined with their energy and responsible with their energy. A narcissist sort of takes no responsibility and kind of like energetically manipulates everything around them to always be kind of playing the victim, but then also being really nice to everybody. So it's just like very subtle ways that we externally try to mechanically control our circumstances to feed unworthiness. Because even just recently, I really had a beautiful piece about this kind of like this greater manifestation, this quantum manifestation, and law of attraction, and living from our hearts and stuff is just the depth of our creative ability and ownership that we create it all. And I'm at a point in my life now where I'm lucky to have done all this inner work and be very guided by my intuition. So I'm pretty much totally living in my intuition, and I'm at a point now where I'm unraveling these last sort of cycles of suffering and cycles of pain and just seeing them spin out really clearly, like the completion process and then birthing a new cycle. So it's all happening simultaneously. It's just sort of an exciting trajectory or turning point as far as actually being able to recognize and let it go. And the reason why I think in the world of kind of psychology or even like medical awareness that we can start to talk about things like narcissism is because it's invisible. And it's something that I definitely recall like growing up with, where like feeling these things, also having like possibly other women in my life feeling these things, and then having them be denied, right? So it's like deny the intuition, and then that makes so the empath or the sensitive person dealing with a narcissist can often feel really confused and kind of like, oh, what's wrong? Like, I've done something wrong. So, like, you're sort of being emotionally targeted to feed a very deep wound of unworthiness. And if you don't play by their rules, they kick you out, or they whisper with like gossip, they make negative things about you. They just never take the responsibility. So someone like an empath who unconsciously sometimes wants to fix it all for everybody, or wants to make it better, and wants to help people with those pains, an empath will never be able to get to the root because they're going to be constantly spinning around in circles. Because this is the weird thing, right? Is that it's almost like beings that aren't aware yet of their feeling state. So they're mentally regurgitating certain information that sounds all right, but they don't want to heal, they don't want to change, they're happy as long as, and they'll keep replacing the people to feed their subtle patterns of manipulation, which keep the lid on, again, those deeper wounds and the kind of subtle ways that they play superiority and inferiority games. And it's something that I gotta say, guys, I'm just having to talk about, because for a long time on this journey for me, there was a little bit of, again, taboo about labels and like not wanting to judge people, right? Like really, really not wanting to judge people. And yet, this thing of narcissism is a really interesting piece, because I could look at one of those videos and clearly highlight various personalities in my life who have exhibited those kind of behaviors. Now, often, certainly as an adult, well, as an adult, you know, it's only now looking back I can see that they were some of my best teachers. So now when I look back at the last cycle and see the situations and dynamics that I attracted, definitely I can pinpoint at least one. And again, my greatest teacher. And I was fairly broken woman at that time as well. Empathic, yes. Giving, yes. Generous, yes. But deeply broken too. And so I was the perfect target, essentially, to supply the narcissist with that moment of, you're going to fulfill this need for me. Oh, you're not going to. And straight up, this is exactly what would happen, right? I remember doing something and it empowered me to the point that suddenly I was like, no, actually, wait a minute. Like, I stepped into my power, basically. And was like, no, actually, we've been here before, and I'm going to do it this way. Why don't you do it that way? And I just said something like a little bit different, which was not normal. I was normally just kind of like biting my tongue and like trying to do what I was told. But this time I like stepped up, and then pretty much within like days or weeks of me making that, you could say, vibrational upgrade of like not necessarily just obeying the rules, this person did exactly what the definition of, like, spread rumors about me and then cut me out their life, like fully just like cut it out. And there was no one talked about it. There was kind of like a lot of confusion. And I realized that loads of people around this person are suppliers. Either they don't know it's happening because a lot of it is invisible, right? And they're people we get attached to. So we tend to supply those tendencies rather than know the truth in our heart and basically stand in our truth, right? Or even stand in our truth for other people that this person might be affecting. So as a fellow sensitive person and empath, again, no labels, but what I mean is being a human being who can be around other human beings and like feel the energy, feel what they're carrying, feel what's sometimes behind the mask. If you res with the empath thing, you just know you are one, right? And it's not necessarily some special gift. We all have different qualities, and more of humanity is realizing that some of us have these really cool kind of intuitive, psychic, broad abilities that can actually really help us out, because it brings clarity. It's shining light onto different aspects of the truth of our divinity and our power, and how to access those gifts. So empaths like us, we need to keep looking at this stuff. We need to keep deducing the difference between the intuition and like and resistance, or like, yeah, an intuitive call versus someone manipulating us, you know? Like, so doing this inner work and being super duper aware of like your authentic truth and your authentic energy and how it feels to be you versus how does it feel when you're engaging with other people's energy. If someone else's energy around you is tight or anxious, or if you feel like you always have to do what they tell you to do, otherwise they'll be displeased or they'll be upset, or if like you know, they talk really nice about people, but then they're acting in a different way. And that's one thing as well. They say one thing and act differently. So they might act really, really nice, but then they don't, but then they are mean to someone. And yeah, just, I guess when you're sensitive, just if you get confused around someone a lot, or if you feel like, yeah, you're being held like on trial about something, like that's a definite sign as well. So I gotta say, I'm hugely not into labels, but I am definitely a compassionate, sensitive, and intuitive person who, on a one level, is actually really appreciative that, like, again, the psychology world is exposing this kind of more subtle and passive form of abuse, because it is it is abusive, it's tactical, there's lies, there's deception. And again, someone who's really just been processing a lot of that kind of energy, it's important for us as empaths to own our power, to own our worth, because yeah, thanks to Maya. Whoa, nice to see you. Yes, because what I'm seeing is that as I own my worth, those personality types are falling away. They're, in miraculous ways, just sort of being sucked out of my life, because energetically it's like, no, that intuitive sword has spoken. You know, you can feel when there's stuff happening, and again, it's not judgment, because one recognizes that any kind of disorder, any kind of dysfunction, I call it any kind of distortion, is born of density, is born of just lower density, lower frequency stuff, and we all got some. And sometimes it's just the depth of the wound is so sort of traumatic or severe or whatever that we almost want to shade and blind ourselves to our own dysfunction. And think that and you can see how it works. You think that if you just keep being nice, then you don't have to look at it, you know? Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, distortion. You know, you imagine truth being the clarity and like the just pure unconditional loving force, then everything that isn't that is like a little bit distorted. So when we get into our alignment, we can feel those distortions in self and in other a lot more clearly, right? And that is the perfect way to close, I suppose, is that remember that we are all one. So it's not like the empaths against the fucking narcissist. No, it's just that it's almost like breathing a sigh of relief, like, okay, we're not crazy. And there's almost a little bit more social sort of validation or acceptance that there's deeper psychological ways of manipulating and abusing one another. And those of us with really pure intentions can start to communicate and lift the lid and hopefully open more of yay, open more of those wounds, talk more and lift more lids and cry a little bit more and share a little bit more, right? Oh, Rochelle, lovely to see you as always. And hopefully one day we won't have to use labels. We'll just know who we are because we know self so well. And we won't need those walls and barriers to protect ourselves from one another, because we'll have no intent to hurt or steal or take from one another, because we will be whole. So in our wholeness, we're all one, and we're all love, and we're all divine, beautiful, expansive, eternal creators in this beautiful imaginary illusion that we call Earth play. We have like loads of wild and amazing sort of aspects to work on. Sunshine, yeah. Yeah, like in this earth zone, in this perceived illusion of separation, as we move into the different frequency realities, you know, we continue our cosmic adventure on a certain level. For those of us who have been connected to that invisible realm, for like the 3D world to suddenly be talking about a personality like a narcissist, it gives us an opportunity to go deeper into the collective pain body. It gives us an opportunity to start shining light on the narcissists, even on the people who are carrying those deep wounds, because I realize there's a lot of suppliers still as the stuff keeps getting lifted. So I can see already in myself how just holding space, but in the knowing, in the deep, loving, and divine knowing, to shine light for certain pockets and people, and sort of pray and gently expect those connected, you know, to source, to really hold space for those people that we may call a narcissist, because they're clearly holding deep, deep wounds, and they need love as much as anybody else. However, sometimes you need to walk away. If your well-being is at stake, if your mental health is at stake, you need to be able to walk away, and you need to be able to recognize the subtle manipulative behavior. And again, we don't need to call it narcissist, because we all do it sometimes, right? We can all fucking be that way sometimes. It's just being open to the fact that, like, hurtful, shady shit can happen invisibly in our head and by covert kind of operations. It's fascinating, really. All you need is love. Do, 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 do. And I got my, like, Super Love Tea t-shirt. Birthplace Earth. Or the cosmos. And, oh my god, guys, you know how I always talk about my orchids? So I normally have, like, a lovely pile of orchids, and I came back from Bali, and I went from, like, 1, and then suddenly I had, like, 6. I've had that plant for, like, almost 3 years, 2.5 years, maybe longer. So yeah, I'm, like, bragging about my orchids nonstop, and then one day I looked over and they were just all gone. Like, they just all fell off all at once. I'm like, what does that mean? I should look it up. I need to look up swans as well. Swans and orchids. I'm gonna look that shit up. I love you guys. I love you guys so effing much. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll see you on the flippity flop, which is probably tomorrow. Peace out, guys. Thank you, Earth to Maya.